Okay, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to this session, A Green ICU. My name is Arthur van Zanten. I'm an intensivist from Ede, the Netherlands, and Wageningen University. It's difficult to pronounce for many chairs of sessions I learned, but I'm also the chair of the FREM section of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, a group of intensivists working on feeding, rehabilitation, endocrinology and metabolism. And we also have some projects trying to reduce the impact of nutrition therapy on the environment. But that's not the topic we're going to discuss today, because we have an esteemed panel here sitting in front of you, and I will introduce them briefly to you. At my right, for you, the left, is Dr. Nicole Hunfeld. She's a pharmacist from Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and also the co-chair of the Environmental Committee of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine. She's, well, over the years, got completely involved in this topic of the Green ICU. Next to her is Dr. Gloria Rodriguez-Vega, an internist and intensivist working in Hospital Menonita de Caguas in Puerto Rico. Wow, excellent. Great that you're here. Next to her is Dr. Ricard Ferrer, head of the intensive care department at Valdebron Hospital in Barcelona, Spain. Also a member of the Environmental Committee of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine. And here next to me is Professor Jan de Waele, surgeon intensivist from Ghent in Belgium and the present president of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine. And he's very involved also to make intensive care greener. Now what we like to do in this, I wish, very interactive session, we don't have prepared slides, it's just a discussion with you. And of course, when there are no questions, I will ask some questions to the panel. But if you have any question, please raise your hand and I will give you the word. And then you have to push a red button of the microphone in front of you. So then we can hear your question. So we try to make it as interactive as possible. And, well, let's start the discussion maybe to give the first word to the panelists. On the question, why should we bother about the Green ICU? Maybe to address the topic, we are going to talk about Green ICU. That's not that you want to paint the intensive care green to reduce delirium or to have new clothes of the nurses or so. It's about, well, the impact of intensive care medicine on the environment, the carbon dioxide imprint or footprint, that kind of stuff. Can we do it better in the future? That's the topic for today. So the first question, maybe can ask Nicole to start and then we can follow up with the others. So why should we bother in intensive care? Do we something wrong in the ICU? Do we cause any problem with the environment? How big is the problem?
If you look at healthcare in general, then the CO2 footprint is approximately 7%, at least in the Western countries. And we think, but there are no data out there, that this is being caused by all the single-use products that we use. And we do know that medication is a big issue there. If you look at intensive cares, then there are some data out there that they are the second largest emitters in hospitals. So basically the OR is the largest one, followed by the ICU, and then followed by the gastroenterology department. There's only one study that showed it, but that's all we have so far. So 7% is, I think, a lot. In the Netherlands, that's comparable to Schiphol Airport and all their CO2 output. And I think we can decrease it, and we should, because if we go on like this and we use all this plastic stuff and we burn it all the time, yeah, we will influence the climate.
Okay, thank you. Others want to respond? Yes, please.
So it's not only a problem of Western worlds, it's also a problem with limited resource countries such as Latin America. You mentioned 7%. In Latin America, it's 5% from the carbon emissions. And Latin America produces 3.9 billion tons in waste. And most of that is from hospitals, and 25% of that, in a study in Brazil, is from the ICU. So in our aim of giving good quality care, we can also do a green ICU.
Maybe also I can add that the idea, the plans, I think is still there. The plan is to reduce 80% of the greenhouse gas emission for 250. And if the percentage is so important, without our participation, or the participation of the hospitals and ICU, it's going to be impossible to achieve this target in 250. So we are maybe we are one of the latest to arrive to this, because we think ICU is a place for saving life and at any cost. But the reality, and we are discussing today, that we can keep doing our job
Even better.
Even better.
Okay, Jan, please.
I would only like to add that, of course, we are part of a bigger thing in society, and I think it doesn't make sense to do something in our ICUs, in our hospitals, and not to be, consistent and aware of the problem in our private lives and in other aspects of society. And to some extent, of course, our shop is open 24/7.
Yeah.
The treatments we do are intenser than what we would do in other parts of the hospital. So to some extent, of course, this makes sense and this is logical, but it doesn't mean that we do not have a responsibility to take and to really have a close look at what we do. And even if it's about saving lives, we need to consider this aspect.
Yeah. Because you, like you said, you can also consider the effect on climate can also kill, if you wish. The climate change also will induce problems with disease or, flooding, starvation, whatever it may also induce. So we try to save lives, but on the other hand, you could also have an effect. Is there any question in the audience at this moment already? Maybe we can dig. Yes, please. Push the button of the microphone.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I work in the United Kingdom as an intensivist. One of the difficulties I've encountered on more than one occasion is the competing interest between infection prevention or IPC, infection prevention and control, versus the attempts to reduce one-way or one-person products. And I'll give a simple explanation or a simple example. Ultrasound gel. We used to use it in a bottle that can be used, over a number of patients. That has then been stopped on an infection control basis because of I was quoted a study, I think it was in South America, where transmission occurred from a bacterium from one patient to the other, or a cohort of one patient to another cohort, and that was basically the end of the conversation. We now have double-wrapped plastic little ultrasound gel sachets that I use a fraction of, the rest goes in the bin. And we've been categorically told that there is no alternative. Is that, I can't believe we're isolated in that, or the UK is isolated in that. Is that a common scenario, and how do you get around it?
We have the same problem. I have people from infection prevention in our green team. They are often with 3 of them. That might be a lot, but I think that really helps because they start a discussion within their department. And we have interventions that failed, and we have successful interventions with them together. I stayed away from the echo gel because I know this story, but we managed to go down on gloves together with them. We switched from gowns to aprons based on their advice. And we shift in our spectrum now. And I think with the gel, we discussed this because we have a national committee in the Netherlands, the Green ICU committee. We discussed this, and in some occasions you're good to go with sodium chloride solution only. So I know hospitals in the Netherlands, even ICUs, that use that instead of the gel. I don't know if this is always okay, and I'm not a medical doctor but a pharmacist, but I heard good experience from colleagues there. So that might also be an option. But if you have issues with infection prevention or whatsoever, try to go for the low-hanging fruit and have some successful stories there first. Otherwise, at least it will stop.
If I may share, we have a similar discussion recently because we have an outbreak of Candida paracilopsis azole resistant. and the reservoir was in the cuffs, in the reusable cuffs. It was almost impossible to remove the candida from the Velcro. We tried many times, and it was impossible. So we have reservoir there, so we have to move to single-use cuff. Of course, we didn't like the idea, but at the end we discussed the trade-off between one thing and the other. And of course, to have a persistent outbreak of this type of microorganism in the ICU is going to cost more under the environmental point of view and under many other things. But the important thing for me is that in this discussion, in this trade-off discussion, you also take into account this factor. In the past, it was just a straight decision. We moved to disposables because we are going to avoid a lot of problems. But now we have this in the discussion.
Yeah, maybe it's good because when we start this discussion, we have just one topic where we can start, and we will discuss other areas or fields that we maybe can make progress with this topic. But it should always be balanced to patient safety and also the cost, maybe the investment you have to do to change the practice. And I consider you to be like champions of this process because you're more involved and working in this field for longer. Can you give us any guidance on how you do this? Because it's in a way also change management. So can we learn from tips and tricks? Nicole, you just said, well, maybe you have to start with low-hanging fruit or don't fight over like the ultrasound gel or so. It seems to be that there are maybe strategies that are more helpful than other ways to reach your goal. Maybe you want to comment on this aspect of changing the practice in ICU.
I think at least what we do is we look at 4 or 5 different items per intervention. So we have a green team in place, we have an annual plan with goals, and it can be a really easy one, like let's go down on gloves, for instance. Although it sounds easy, it's not easy. We switched from IV paracetamol to oral paracetamol. The next one will be a switch from IV phosphate to oral phosphate. But each time we discuss costs, environmental impact, workload for the nurses especially, and safety. And these 4 items all need a go before we start the change. And we do this because sometimes there are questions from our financial department, like what does this green team do in blah, 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 blah. And I want to show them that we do save money, because these interventions all save money. Sometimes the nurses come and see me like, oh, you want me to recycle all the CRT bags, but it's I need to do this, blah, blah, it takes some time. And I can tell them, yes, I know it takes time, but on the other hand, we saved you time because of this and this and this. This really helps in discussion. So we look at it from a multiple perspective, let's say strategy, and it helps in making the change. Because the ICU people know that we do this. So they know that if they start talking about the environment, I can tell them, yeah, but it also saves money and it might save you time, et cetera, et cetera. So we made the story a bit broader, I think, and that really helped us.
If I may chime in there, I think this is a very important point, that people understand that going green is not about taking things away. That's typically what this is associated with. You think, oh, I can no longer eat meat, I can no longer drive my petrol car. And people associate with going green with like it's negative, and it's less lower level of care, and this is not true. There is of course a threat, and if you would say like we do all infection prevention strategies, we do just away with them, well then in the end you may end up actually being less green, because keeping a patient in the hospital, in the ICU for a longer time on a ventilator because he or she is infected with a Klebsiella pneumonia and develops VAP, then that's not a good thing either. So it needs to be balanced. We need to get rid, of course, of the things that do not work. And you absolutely don't want fundamentalists. I mean, this is never good, but you don't want pharmacists to be fundamentalists for infection prevention. You need to get everybody on board and make them understand that going green can actually mean that you are working in a much safer way, that you are quicker. And the gloves, I think, is a very nice example. I mean, when you have done proper hand hygiene prior to trying to put on disposable gloves, I think most of you who do this regularly will agree that it's quite difficult. It takes a lot of time, and it doesn't make life easier.
we try to incorporate the patient perspective in our discussions in the GREEN team. And really it's a problem of communication there, because if, as Jana was saying, if you focus this just as a green intervention, for the patient perspective, maybe it means less safety, less care. And I think should be focused like a strategy, a quality improvement intervention, reduction of low value care. Focus on that, because if you focus just in the green part, especially when you try to communicate the patient, can be perceived as something that put them in danger.
I want to expand a little bit and also try to make it personal. So involving, it takes a team like you mentioned, but it also include the whole staff in that conversation. And then it does not become an imposition or a negative thing like Jen just mentioned. It's something that's going to improve patient care and involve them. We involved our group, and we did in Celebrating Green Day, on strategies that they would recommend for us to becoming even better and greener. And one of them was even very simple, was eliminating all paper. And then we decided to go paperless. So that's one of the low-hanging fruits. And then as you see this group being involved and you create a culture in your unit, then you're going to keep improving and then going for the more difficult strategies to make your ICU green.
Any questions from the audience at this point? Maybe, if not, we can move maybe to the topic where to start, because I think there are many, factors or procedures or aspects of intensive care medicine that could have an impact. And Nicole said, well, maybe you have to start with the low-hanging fruit, but from a perspective of the most gain, the most benefit on reducing the CO2 footprint, for instance, where do we have to start? What are the major issues in intensive care that induce this problem? Is there any data on what is relevant and maybe seems to be relevant but is a small aspect only?
Yes, there are data out there. Electricity in an ICU is, of course, one of the biggest one, unless you have renewable energy in your hospital. So it makes sense to know what your hospital is doing there. Be aware that if a ventilator is in a standby mode, that requires still 90% of the electricity compared to the on mode. So if you don't want any electricity there, you need to pull the plug. And companies don't mention this. So we measured this. So we measured all the equipment in the ICU room, and I think the ventilator was a striking one. And then you need to discuss together, are we able to shut it down in one room, and do we have 5 minutes to switch it on, etc.? But that's a thing you can discuss with the team. So electricity is one chunk. Transportation of families and staff is another big one, depending on the location of your hospital. But if people come by car and they need to travel, then that adds up. And the third one, that's the whole scope 3 of a footprint, so-called everything we use and buy. It's medication. That's 40% of that part. And 10 to 20% is medical products. And medication is huge there. We measured that we used 250,000 kilograms of medication in my ICU per year. And we also use 250,000 kilograms of medical product. That's what we carry in the ICU. And medication footprint is high because of the chemical procedures. 80% of the footprint of a drug is caused by the chemical synthesis of the drug itself. So that's not something we can handle in the ICU. We cannot influence that part, but we can influence the part of stopping it, considering your protocols. Is this really needed? Do you need an additional syringe or extra bag? Those are the steps you can easily make, I think, and you can reconsider this every day during rounding. It's kind of easy one.
I want to mention that that you have to involve people able to do metrics. This is very important because at the beginning you start with enthusiasm, but if you don't measure, you cannot measure the impact, you cannot understand what you're doing, and then the enthusiasm goes down because you cannot report what you are doing. So you need meters for energy consumption specific for the ICU, for water consumption. And in most of the ICUs, I'm sure that we don't have meters. So we need, that is not expensive, it's not complex, but we need to involve the right people. Also, we need metrics about waste production, etc. And for that, what we are doing now is a point prevalence study, and maybe you can measure, but you have to do it. So I think metrics, it's important to understand what are you doing and, to keep the momentum and to keep the enthusiasm of the team.
Yeah, excellent point. Who of you has like a green team or a group of people working on this topic? Can you raise your hand? So it's still a few only. So I think it's good that you're here and maybe become enthusiastic for this topic and maybe start working on it. What about, well, of course you can start in change management programs, you need a champion. So maybe you will be the future champions for your ICU. And then of course you need a group. Can you give us any guidance on who should be involved in a green ICU team? And what about support by executives or management for this initiative? You want to? Yeah.
So you need to make it a multidisciplinary team, and it needs to involve all partners that are able to make a decision also. So you need administrative support, you need staff from the ICU, but like Helen mentioned, you also need from the infection control perspective, because you need to strike a balance between what's sometimes, as the other attendee mentioned, with infectious control. And you need somebody from QI and metrics, because the way this is going to do is going to improve patient outcomes. And, sustaining it, green sustainability is going to improve patient outcomes.
Yeah, Nicole, you mentioned also travel, transportation of patients. Now to the ICU probably will be an ambulance or inside the hospital, but also like staff or family transportation. Can you, specify a little bit about this topic?
Yeah, we don't have data about the families visiting. It's not easy to collect those, but we did collect data from all the staff. This is a 50-bed ICU with 200, I think, healthcare professionals working there. And we noticed that the commuting part, even 95% normally comes by bike or public transportation. The evening and night shifts are a problem. Of course, people then want to come by car, it's much safer, etc. So we have kind of an issue there because it really adds up to our footprint. Yeah. Because we try to calculate footprint per patient per day, and transportation is a big chunk. And I thought that it wouldn't be that big, but still, because of the evening and the night shift, you can see a rise there.
Yes, please.
In some medium cities, at least in Spain, I guess everywhere, in some medium cities, the hospital is the company with more workers in the city.
Yeah.
Maybe not the company with the highest budget, but the company with more workers.
But with the budget.
And with more users. And I am surprised that sometimes public transportation is not focused in the hospital, with the number of users and the number of workers. All hospitals are in the city center, new hospitals are built in the surroundings, and really they don't have these facilities being probably the most useful service you have in the city.
I agree this is important, but of course this is beyond the responsibility of those of you working in an ICU. I think this needs to be aligned with not only the hospital, but probably like the city. I can tell you, for instance, in Ghent, we've been wanting for the previous 10 years try to build a new parking garage, but the city didn't allow us because we did not have a transportation plan, as they called it. And now, if you live within a 5-kilometer radius, you're no longer allowed to travel by car to the hospital. You have to travel by bike, and there's lots of incentives. But it's a nice example of how this is way beyond our reach. And I think, I agree, it's an important aspect, but this is really dependent on the bigger picture and the powers that are at a different level.
Yeah, I did a small project for a dialysis department of a university medical center in the Netherlands, and There we found also the majority of the emissions of the environmental effect was induced by transportation of the dialysis patient with a taxi 3 times per week to the hospital, typically done with large cars with diesel engines. So one simple thing could be to contract like a company with electrical cars, and so we suggested that to the management. So I hope we made a change there, please.
Can I maybe ask in your hospitals, who has a sustainability officer working in the hospital who is only committed, not in the ICU, but working for the whole hospital in general? We have this in Ghent.
Similar. Yeah, we also.
And I mean,
only a few. Yeah.
And that's also important. Again, this is our responsibility, but as much also the hospital's responsibility at the same time.
Now, can you give us any impressions of maybe research or early projects that have been finalized that suggest that we can safely change our practice in ICU while reducing the carbon footprint, for instance? Are there already data, or is it ongoing research?
We measured whether IV lines can be used for 7 days instead of 4 days. Because this is an intended use, because the company states that you can only use them for 4 days, we needed to do some additional testing. Basically, the company then needs to give a directive there, and they told me, yes, well, we didn't check the flow during 7 days, so we think the flow might change. So that was an easy one. So I brought 7 IV bags to the technical department. They have all kinds of infusion pumps there. They had a flow rate of 2 mils per hour. This was checked every minute, so I had a lot of data by the end of the week, and nothing happened there. We did the same for the arterial lines and the infusion pump lines, and that company, by the way, stated that they can be used during 7 days. So we switched the whole system, and now we do a change of lines every 7 days. There are also data out there that the use of sterilized syringes, so like the pre-filled ones that are being sterilized in the end, and infusion bags that contain no additional drug can also be used during 7 days. So we switched this as well. That's all evidence-based.
Wow. Any initiatives in the audience? Yes, please. Can you comment on what you did in your hospital?
Oh, sorry, not an initiative. I just had a question based on what you said, which is talking about dealing with trade bodies, for example. So there was obviously an economic benefit to the company of you not changing lines at 7 days, but in 4 days. So how do you find it is dealing with, the list of companies behind you, for example, where their economic priorities may not be the same as yours in terms of going green may actually not be beneficial in them selling you as much product?
No, quite often they want to make money, of course, but I think the whole system is shifting now. They really come up with questions like where can we help and what topics are of interest. And with the lines especially, they really told me we don't have data. So I told them then we will measure it ourselves. But it also means that for this particular one, we need to change the MDR regulation. So that's something we can do in the hospital. It's not a nice thing to do. It's a lot of paperwork. But based on the data that we have, we will do this. So officially, we're still in pilot phase. And once this MDR change is ready, we're good to go. And then we also get a green light from infection prevention to start doing this in the whole hospital.
It's medical device regulation.
Yeah, because it's an intended use. You need to comply and you need to change it.
Going back to the available evidence on how interventions effectively can reduce the impact on the environment while being safe, I think there's quite a body of evidence on the avoiding low-value care. And then I'm thinking of daily chest X-rays, routine blood sampling and stuff. I think mainly the outcomes that have been studied are financial, but I think overall most studies showed that mortality is not increased when you do less. So this low-value care, I think there's quite a bit of evidence there, albeit that the impact on the environment has rarely been studied. But then again, reducing the number of chest X-rays or reducing the amount of samples you take, I would be surprised if it would turn out to be a bigger threat for the environment compared to not doing it. And so I think there's some logic to also start there.
Yeah, and like you also said, switching IV to oral when possible, or enteral via nasogastric feeding tube or so, seems to be rather safe for many drugs. And of course you have to look at the bioavailability with your pharmacists and so on. But I think it can be done for a lot of medication. Yeah?
If I may mention antibiotics as well, not that I want to drag antibiotics into everything, but there's also another aspect, and for most of the drugs and things we do, the impact stays within the hospital. Antibiotics are typically something that have an impact also outside of the hospital. Much of this is goes unfiltered into the sewage system. Antibiotics, but also the multi-drug resistant pathogens that are coming from our overuse of antibiotics. And if not the pathogens, then the resistance genes also go into the environment. So we need to think that it's not only about the immediate impact, but also the secondary effects.
You not only mention antibiotics, but also propofol. It also contaminates the water in the production phase. So it's not only antibiotics, there are so many other medications that if you reduce the medications, you also impact global health in that sense.
Well, we have to use the medication wisely. Eh? Exactly. So, any questions? Now, many in the room don't have a green team yet, or are not working on initiatives to improve the carbon dioxide imprint. Where to start? Do you have some ideas about when you start with this kind of initiatives, what could be helpful, what is maybe low-hanging fruit, that because when the first project fails, it's not a very good incentive to continue. So in your experience, what can you recommend to us?
So I can share what we did. Yeah? Okay. And so the first initiative was last year that we built, we didn't paint the ICU green, but we put a green wall that it was a space for proposing ideas for not only ICU
make it
team,
visible.
Make it visible, not only the ICU team, also the patients and some visitors that come to the unit. So from there we collect ideas and we see which are at least the priorities. And then from that exercise, we start with two initiatives. One, I think, can be understandable, is related to water consumption, because in Barcelona it's not like here, so we have great problems with that. If you visit Barcelona regionally, you will see in every hotel, please save water, etc. So we move from water hygiene to patients from dry hygiene. And then the other one was about waste, and try to be very precise in what is hazardous waste and need a special treatment, and what waste can be recycled, because sometimes we have the possibility of throwing the plastic in one bag or the other, and just because it's in the box, we throw it in the hazardous waste. And of course, this is going for incineration, has high cost to the hospital, has many implications. So this is the two initiatives we have. But we started with the green wall as a way of collecting ideas.
Good suggestion. Other suggestions on how to start? Yes.
Well, I think in many places there will already be quite some enthusiasm and commitment. People in many countries, I hope, also do recycle and do things at home. When they come to the hospital, they are kind of frustrated, even like, I'm doing all this at home, but I'm not able to do it here. So I think it's very important to kind of detect this enthusiasm and channel it towards a green team. On the other hand, I think we need to be very careful that a green team is not like, like a club and everybody's like, well, they take care of it. And that, and I don't have to take any personal responsibility anymore. I think it's very important that, yes, a green team can help and can develop things and must do things, but the responsibility is a collective one.
Yeah, but maybe we can discuss that. How can you translate this champion team, this very enthusiastic people, and bring it into the DNA of the intensivist and the ICU nursing staff? Any suggestions on how to do this?
Yeah, we designed, I think, over the years, based on experience and some failures, a strategy there. We have this annual plan for our green team, and that's communicated within the whole ICU. So the medical team, but also the persons that are cleaning and stuff like that. We need everybody there, so everybody knows what we will do in 2025.
Okay.
If this requires the change of a medical protocol, and with the IV oral switches, there is a link to our protocols. Then with members from the green team and the responsible person for that protocol, together we will change the protocol. We will make a concept phase of the protocol. We'll discuss this in the medical team. We have a staff meeting every month to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Sometimes there are things that require a different approach. Then we adapt one more time. And in the end, we're good to go. And then we communicate that the protocol is changed. And we measure the impact. So we will always communicate, hey, people, we switched from IV paracetamol to oral. We saved this amount of money. We saved this from a footprint perspective. Thank you all, and let's continue. It's always a positive message showing what we did together. That kind of works in our ICU.
Okay, thank you. Gloria.
One of the things is to also find like-minded people, and not only within your hospitals. There's societies, medical societies are good. Australia and New Zealand has a perfect toolkit on building a green ICU. European Society published guidelines. SCCM just published a paper in their journal now in March on how to establish a roadmap and a plan, and also finding a toolkit. So it's not part of like reinventing the wheel. The wheel has already been invented and might need tweaking to adapt it to your hospital, but there are literature out there and toolkits out there that will help you establish your goal. So I guess the commitment for today, like you mentioned, go out and bring in something in your ICU to start a green ICU team, or something that will impact the environment. That will be my assignment for them today.
Yeah, because you will encounter people, they say, oh, well, we do it here, but look at maybe India, China or so, they don't bother, so it doesn't help at all, why should we start? And I think from the perspective of change management literature, we know you have to focus on the early adopters and not on those laggards and the people opposing your ideas. Of course, you have to take safety into account because patient safety is important, as Jan already said. If you induce more infections or transmission, then maybe all the effort is gone. But if you can achieve, and another aspect you mentioned is like having a party. So when you succeed to have some kind of success story in an intervention, well, I don't know, what do you do in Puerto Rico? Do you cake, or what is sent to the ICU then?
It's a pizza party.
A pizza party. Wow, that's great. Yes, please, Jan.
I do think at the same time we need to be careful to just copy what works in one hospital to the next one. Yeah. There may be important differences in culture, in practices that make that certain interventions make sense really in hospital A, but may not work at all in hospital B. So it is important, and this is why typically these green teams are a bottom-up initiative. It's people at the bedside who see, like, I'm doing this, but does it really make sense? Is this the best way, and is this the most environmentally friendly way to do it? So I strongly believe that it should be adapted to what is present, what works in the individual hospital.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Also important that this champion is supported by the head of department, of course. Sometimes the head of the department who pull the trigger, but of course the head of the department cannot handle this intensively, so have to delegate in a champion. But this champion should be under with a strong support of the head of department, integrated in the structure of the hospital, because, as we said, the ICU alone is difficult to work. Sure, in the hospital there is an umbrella for that, and also exemplarity is very important for many things, but in this case is very important. If the head of the department is coming with a big digital card to the hospital and is not practicing, I mean, is using plastic bottles every day, and it's then it's difficult to involve all the others. So exemplarity again is very important. Well, point.
What do you have there?
I'm thirsty, and I have to.
What is
it? Are important. Huh?
Can you explain what you have? It's green.
Well, it's green on the outside and it's transparent on the inside. So this is not a green drink or so. But again, but this is a very
important thing. And yes, we hand out these kind of bottles to the nurses in the hospital to avoid the use of this thing. There are also here in the there's a refill stations at different levels as well. So it's just a small thing, but a big impact. So
maybe we can discuss a little bit about, we talked about things we can do in ICU. Do we as intensive care also have a role in the hospital, maybe infecting others with the concept? Because we knew that OR and ICU are important, departments in the hospital responsible for this effect. Can we play a role also in disseminating this green ICU aspect to the rest of the hospital? Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for collaborations. We had a plan to, let's say, we had a problem first, of course. Transfer from patients from the ED to the ICU often resulted in stopping syringes, throwing them away. They didn't trust the content. I think you are familiar with this. So then a nurse started complaining to me like, it's kind of strange. I get this patient, been in the ED for maybe 30 minutes, and then I need to make new syringes. What do you think? I said, well, why are you making new syringes? Yeah, because I think the concentration can be different. So already years ago, we started this joint project, OR, ED, ICU, to make sure that all the concentrations of all the drugs are the same. It's forbidden to do something else. If I find out, they know they get a phone call. But it saved us a lot of medication and also a lot of time and a lot of frustration anyway. And in the end, this succeeded. So everybody knows from in those departments, like, hey, we work together with the ICU, the OR, and the ED. It really helps. And also those green teams, because we all have our own green team within the department, but the acute care has an overarching meeting as well every 3 months. So then we discuss with ED, OR, ICU, hey, what are you doing? Can we learn from each other? What works, what doesn't work? That's also a lot of fun. It's just 30 minutes on a Monday morning, but we see each other and we share practices. Really helps.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to go to more like the hospital level. What we did in our hospital, we changed the food delivery system to the patients, and we hired cooks, and we have now a room service concept. So we have a call center. You can order food anytime you want to have it. It will be freshly cooked and sent to your room. And the effect is we spend a lot of money for the cooks and fresh food in the kitchen, but the waste has been reduced by 30% because the proportion of food that's eaten by the patients is much higher because they get it also at the moment they want to have it. Because typically you order the food one day before, it's sent to your room at 12 o'clock. You're not there because the endoscopy program ran out of time, you know. You go there 2 hours later, the food is cold, you don't want to eat it. So this, we can also optimize this. Is there anything to do with reuse? I know in nutrition, sometimes you can have a tray with food for the patient. In ICU, we use a lot of medical nutrition, of course, but some patients can eat oral food. They have packaged yogurt or whatever, and then it's not eaten by the patient. It's sent back to the kitchen, and they throw it away because, well, it was out of the fridge. But there is a lot of evidence that if this time is very short, that you can reuse a completely unopened, a closed package again. And we discard a lot of. What about medication? Or I heard that even propofol syringes for one patient are used and sent to the next patient. But there you have the infection control issue and so. Any initiatives of reusing intended products for a specific patient that can be used by another patient?
Well, that's a big issue in the Netherlands, in the OR especially at the moment. So we are about to publish a paper that really states that you can, I would not say reuse, but continue the use of a syringe, but with special valves. You need 2
bacterial filters.
No, how is it called? It's the special OR valve that saves medication from flowing back.
Okay.
But you need 2
one-way valve or something.
Yeah, you need 2 valves, one at the beginning of the line and one at the end. You need a long line because you don't want medication with something going back up. So if you do that and infection prevention agrees and you have a local protocol, then in the Netherlands, then you're good to go. I think in the ICU with so many medication, you use it way longer than in the OR. I don't know if this would make sense, but in the OR it does. But it requires a new way of working and a new system. And this is very strict on the protocol.
Any questions? Yes, please. Please use the microphone. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I think that's working. I had a question. Oh, maybe not. I had a question just about using inhaled gases, just in terms of context with the OR. So, inhaled gases versus total intravenous anaesthetic. Some of our consultants use TIVA with consideration of environmental impacts in mind. With using TIVA, obviously there's an increased plastic burden with syringes, lines, monitoring. Does that kind of even up the difference between, or is there still an advantage with TIVA, total intravenous versus inhalational?
So who wants to answer this?
Yeah, there is data out there that the TIVA is better for the environment, so you will save. And there's also, but I think last month, a group from Amsterdam showed the data for the Netherlands. All academic ICUs made the switch. And I think they also calculated the impact, so that might help you.
But that's for the OR, I think. There are also ICUs using inhalation gases for sedation, but we heard the study this morning that the outcomes of the patients were not really very well. So I think this is not a strategy for the future, I think, at least in this studied population, of course. Any more questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, I had a question. A lot is about reducing what we're already doing, but of course we also want to prevent implementing new polluting strategies. So I was wondering, what is your take on artificial intelligence? And because I'm noticing that a lot of questions is like, maybe we can use AI to help us, write a summary, or maybe we can use it to do blah, 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 blah. So do you have any strategies on how to implement this or not implement?
It depends on how you use AI. If it's just a small model and you have a small data set, then the amount of CO2 is okay. We ran a small test, and it turned out that there was the impact was like one pair of gloves only. It's a different story if you use large language models. The training of those models is really resource intensive, not only CO2, but it requires a lot of water for the data storage. You need to cool all those systems. So it really depends on how you use AI. And we had this discussion because in the ICU we have this huge green team now on the move, and we have the AI data hub. So we combined knowledge and forces to make sure that we will not go down on CO2 based on large language models. It should be balanced there. And we also need more data there. I think if you start using AI or you want to do something, I think we need to know what the footprint is. It's not a difficult one, but that would help us all.
I think that's one aspect. AI causing a problem with electricity and inducing like an enhanced CO2 footprint. But could we also use AI to make ICUs greener? So the other way around, and then maybe it could balance out this effect. What is your opinion about that?
That's also possible. We just launched our Green ICU platform that uses an AI model which calculates the amount of product being used per patient per day, and we added the footprint to that if we have the information. And that's like a simple use of AI, and the Green team will start implementing this soon.
So then you get more information and maybe targets to start with interventions. Jan, you want to comment?
I see more value in actually AI helping us to improve outcomes, as in, when you reduce the duration of mechanical ventilation, length of stay, if you identify patients who do not need antibiotics or a certain treatment, that may indirectly, of course, have a big impact on the carbon footprint. Of course, it is important to balance things out, and I think AI, large language model, or whatever technology you use, everything it requires to develop this and to actually have it run on your database needs also to be considered. So all the electricity, and I think that's kind of complex. We hear that indeed it requires a lot of energy, but as to how it exactly balances out to the potential benefits is unclear. And this is why I think when we study these interventions in health technology assessments, for instance, we should also be looking at what is the impact on the environment, and not only on patient outcomes, who may, for instance, be unchanged, but if there's a positive impact on the environment, a certain intervention could definitely make sense.
Yeah, it could be that also sometimes we say, well, there's 1 day shorter ventilation, 1 day shorter dialysis, but it didn't translate into a shorter length of stay in the ICU. But still, the effect on the CO2 effect could be there.
And that's why we've been advocating in the Green Paper from ESICM to also include environmental sustainability outcomes in those studies. So not just look beyond the traditional outcomes and health technology assessments, but also look at environmental impact. And of course, there's a lot of work to be done there as to how exactly this works, and we need to make sure that we use comparable methods that allow us also to compare different studies in the end. But it's a new dimension I think we need to work on.
Yeah, we have to...
Maybe...
Yeah, maybe you can all give a last comment to the audience about this topic, and then we have to end the session. I see we're almost running out of time.
Maybe to say a word about research, because we discuss about in clinical practice, but also it's the same in research, so an artificial intelligence. I mean, if you look to a clinical trial in the ICU, the amount of procedures that include is huge. Some of them will be never analyzed. Never analyzed, so this is waste, absolute waste, and also artificial intelligence can help to reduce part of this strategy. So I use my final words to say that also we have to think in research to reduce the amount of low quality indicators that maybe you are not going to help, but also to add these new tools that may help to reduce the workload and the impact.
Gloria, please.
I think that Green ICU can be established in any ICU in the world, and it's about quality care and improving patient outcomes, and thinking, low middle income countries, how it can be done. One other thought, and I'm not going to take time this one. Go ahead, Helen.
Nicole, last comment.
Yeah, start with something really small, make it a success story, make sure you have pictures and data out there, and then I think other departments will come to you and they will ask for your help, and that's really cool.
Jan, please.
And I would hold the plea to not only think of clinical applications, but also consider research and education, and also consider sustainability in these different areas.
Thank you very much. The panelists, a round of applause for them. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here, and I hope you have a very nice meeting in the next few days. It's nice weather in Brussels, so thank you for being here.